All right. So, just to kind of begin, my name's Jonathan. I have been studying Chinese medicine for over the past decade now. And as I've been working with individuals, I find that oftentimes there is some underlying issues that people are missing when it comes to the health of their digestion. So, I wanted to kind of do a demonstration, a little bit of a lecture of therapy for individuals and to kind of help them understand what's going on with their body. Um, First and foremost, I always like to talk about vocabulary. So everybody is always on the same page when it comes to language. And so I created this nice little PDF that we're just going to follow along. And I'm going to go ahead and image share my screen for the moment, so that you can all have a look at the vocabulary that I want to show you. All right. Can everybody see this so far?
Yep.
All right. So just very easily, I got the vocabulary in John's Chinese medicine classes. I made this a couple of years ago as I've been teaching a lot of Chinese medicine courses at massage schools and just in my private practice. And one of the things that we talk about is qi, or energy. What is qi? It just is a energy or life force, or you could think of it as your vitality of your health. And the qi travels through these pathways in the body called meridians. And these meridians are adjustable channels or canals. Think of them as like streams or rivers of qi. And then there's the word vitality. Most people are familiar with the word vitality, meaning health or quality of life. What a lot of people don't know is that the word health actually reflects into etymologically, it reflects into the word spirit and wholeness. And so the word whole, we think of the word as holy, holistic, complete, filled, or fulfilled. There's no breaks, no problems whatsoever. And the opposite of something whole would be something empty. It would be like a void or a lack. It would be unhealthy. This next one here, it says spirit. Now, most people are familiar with the word spirit, referring to something like a soul or something, but spirit just means breath, or another word for it is anima, as in the word like animal or animate. So when you think of the word respiration, that is your ability to breathe in and out. It is called inspiration to breathe in, and expiration when you breathe out. And then respiration is pretty much just the repeated action of that. So when you breathe in, it creates an animation, an anima in the body, a movement. And when you have that movement, you think of the word respiration. We've got the word inspiration down here, bring vitality into some sense of divinity or to incarnate. Expiration is to breathe life or vitality out. It's that sense of decay. You think of that with your food and expiration dates. Now, the word incarnate literally just means to bring the spirit into the body or flesh, or to heal. And so when you breathe in, you're breathing in the spirit, so to speak, the breath. And carne actually means meat or flesh. So when you're breathing in, you're actually breathing the atmosphere into the body or into the flesh. A very easy example of understanding this is if you've hurt yourself in any way where you lost range of motion on, let's say, your shoulder, and now you can't lift your arm up. There's a lack of mobility or range of motion in the arm, a sense of lack of movement. And very simply put, we could say that because of that lack of movement, you are not whole, you are not complete. You do not have good health in that area, or the vitality has weakened. In other words, we can easily just go back and say, oh, there's probably a meridian that's blocked and the energy is not flowing through the stream, kind of like a dam. So I always refer to my clients when they're dealing with aches, pains, knots, or tensions. I tell them, think of them like dams in a river. Generally, massage therapy or chiropractic care type things are really good for breaking up those dams. But if the river refuses to flow, then there still is a lack of mobility, a lack of life force or vitality into the area. So we want to make sure that we bring that energy back up. And I've seen many people who have had loss of range of motion due to an injury, and you increase the meridian flow through the area, and all of a sudden maybe the injury hasn't fully healed or had time to fully heal, but they've regained range of motion because all the ligaments, joints become stabilized, the muscles become stronger and actually able to lift comfortably without causing harm. And most people will already start feeling a relief from the pain. It's a very simple process through Chinese medicine. I tell people, thinking of those dams and those rivers, if you stimulate these meridians and increase the flow of the river, you can knock down those dams without ever even having to go to the area that is in pain or that is having the discomfort or stiffness. So in essence, just to heal the body means to bring vitality or life force back in, or that chi. And the American way to spell chi is generally CHI. A lot of cultures, like the Japanese, will spell it KI and pronounce it ki. And then Chinese generally have it spelled with QI. So you might have heard like of Qigong or Tai Chi. Qigong is the practice or development of the vital life force in the body. Think of it as like physical therapy, except for it's physical therapy of the meridians and your organs. So to bring healing, I'm just going to go ahead and read this back here for you. To bring healing means to bring life back into an area that is considered holy work, because you're making people whole, or the work of the divine. As practitioners in the healing arts, this was written for students of mine. So I said, in the healing arts, you are inspiring to help clients bring life back to their troublesome areas. Now down through here, we've got what we call the opposites. We got the unholy, the incomplete, the disconnected, or to do harm, or what people call evil. Another word for evil is the diabolical or the diablo. Dia in Greek means to cut or to cross. Think of the word diagonal, to cross off. So diablo, to cut away from the whole, or to separate or segregate. You could even think of this as far as discrimination, because you end up segregating to border, and segregation means to border off or to take apart in groups. And I think everybody can agree that if somebody came up and chopped my arm off, that would be a very unholy thing to do, very, very evil. There's always rules to the exception. You could say, oh yeah, but there's a deadly venom coursing through my veins in my arm, and I've got, only seconds to live unless we chop it off. In that case, hey, you take that part and save the whole thing, the rest of the body. It's better than nothing. So there's always those kind of rules to the exception. But just in essence, what the Diablo is anything that cuts away from the whole or separates one another. It's border off, give that sense of segregation. So there's sadly a lot of people in the world that preach wholeness and holy aspects of spirituality and things like that, yet they still have the practices of the Diablo, where they segregate one culture, one group for one reason or another. You've got blonde hair, you've got funny looking feet, doesn't matter, they'll find an excuse to segregate away from you and cause a lot of problems and harm to just the equality of life, or the health of life, really. So to cause harm is to not accept an aspect of life, to segregate or make life unholy or incomplete. And to maximize our healing abilities in our bodies and whatnot, we must not judge, segregate, harm, or dispirit ourselves from others. You don't want to put other people down. You don't want to belittle or berate. You really want to keep everything in the sense of wholeness and fairness amongst everything. So to do this, we also must make peace with the fact that things in life are actually, in fact, evil. In this world, these evil things happen, and that is just a part of the whole. But as healers or people who are trying to make ourselves better, our roles are to erase those lines drawn between each other and from within, so that we can actually feel and express a sense of wholeness with ourselves and with each other. Now, this is where we start to get into a very important thing in Chinese medicine. You've got the health of the organ plus the energy that's coursing through that organ, which is going to inevitably equal the function of that organ. And I'll go ahead and elaborate a little bit more on that as I read through this here for you. Qi is the substance that moves blood. Blood brings extra qi to replenish the qi and bring more vitality back to the tissues. It's kind of like the two sides of the same coin. Every cell must have an adequate amount of qi, or that cell will not be able to function as it needs to. As tissues decay, the tissues lose its functionality. Bringing enough qi to those tissues can revitalize them and begin repairing the decaying issues. Decaying tissues. I got distracted for a moment. Qi takes many forms, such as food and drink, light, magnetism, air, electricity, and more. Everything is energy and is given the right given in the right interactions. Most things are beneficial for life. Energy is not just vibrational, but it is morphological. Morphological meaning that it has the ability to change shape and formation, not just the sense of vibration in itself, but actually to change from one substance to another. Some people refer to that as alchemy, when things start to change, like the seed of a plant starts to change in the soil of the ground. So again, to elaborate a little bit more on the organ plus the energy function, if you can imagine, and I always love using two different sort of metaphors or analogies for this. The first one is, imagine you have a fan that you plug into an outlet, and it's supposed to go to a certain voltage. When you plug that into the right voltage, the fan works, the propeller spins, and it pushes the air out towards you. And you can always, adjust the speed of the fan. And as you adjust the speed of the fan, it works harder to push more air. But if you were to take that same plug and plug it into an outlet where there was no electricity running through it, well, the fan wouldn't actually spin or work. And so this is the same sort of aspect that happens with the digestive organs. When we're looking at like the stomach and somebody has no appetite, no hunger, they can't put anything inside their stomach because it just hurts, there could be this lack of energy that's in that area. Subsequently, the opposite can happen where there's too much. And if you take a fan and plug the fan in and it's getting too much electricity, well, then the fan is going to have an issue and it's not going to work right. And it's going to probably overfunction or burn out on something else is going to happen. Rather than being in an underfunctioning state, it's going to overfunction and develop too much heat and cause damage and issue. This too can also happen with the organs. And so it's kind of a delicate balance between the two states of excess and deficiency. And you always want to have that sense of balance with the energies pumping through them. Now, if you have an organ, let's say, that's been damaged by scar tissue or something like that, that too is also going to affect the function of the organ. You can have adequate amounts of energy running through that organ, and it can still be relatively balanced. But if there's that scar tissue, if you don't heal that scar tissue within the organ and soften that tissue, it's still going to cause problems. And the organ might not function well enough, even with a healthy amount of the energy moving through it. Although it'll function a whole lot better with a healthy amount of the energy moving through it than if the energy was out of balance and the tissue of the organ was damaged. That would be a serious problem for a lot of people.
Why would there be scar tissue, and then how would you heal the scar tissue?
Scar tissue can form from illnesses or the physical injuries, like ruptures, ulcers. It can be formed from, like in the lungs. You hear a lot about it right now, dealing with pneumonia and COVID. Not just COVID, but pneumonia in general can cause some scar tissuing in on the lungs, which can cause a lot of future problems for those individuals who are trying to breathe. Think your scar tissue is really tough. So if your lungs are supposed to be able to expand and be flexible, and you've got this tough, stiff spot that as it expands, it doesn't stretch and move as efficiently like the rest of the tissue would. That causes an internal problem of stress and tension, and those areas might not actually absorb through the oxygen. Or in the case of like a stomach ulcer, it might make it a little more difficult to swallow foods and digest those foods. Hopefully the stomach ulcer will have healed. There are many different ways that people can actually heal their organs and their tissues. Herbs are generally a fantastic way of doing that. But which herbs you'd have to take is going to be very unique to the individual and the issue of where the scar tissue is formed and developed. A lot of people think scars are permanent, even the ones on our skin, but they don't have to be. They can actually dissolve and break away. Using the right kinds of oils and massage techniques or other healing medicines and ointments for the skin can actually heal that too. And the same thing applies with the skin too, because the skin is an organ. If you damage the skin and leave a bunch of scar tissue on the skin, then that's going to interfere with the energy pathways of the meridians, and that can cause more slightly smaller imbalances in other areas of the body as well. But I'll actually show you the meridian. Let's see, that's not it. Where is it? Here it is. Oh, get out of the way. So these are a list of the meridian pathways. Starting off with the bladder meridian, you can see that this area by the eye, there's this little hollow spot right up here by the eye. That one in particular is where the bladder meridian starts. The second one, you'll feel it in the hollow of your eyebrow by pushing up right there. There's almost this little divoted area that's kind of hollowed. And so if you press on that, you'll find that the bone structures actually in your body are designed to allow these meridian pathways to flow through these areas unobstructed. And they're very much close to the surface. Actually, each one of these specific points is where it makes contact with the surface of the body. And that's where acupuncturists or massage therapists like myself who study the acupressure system will actually go to stimulate the meridian pathways. And that will actually stimulate functions of the bladder. But this point also helps with all the tissues around the eyes. So a majority of eye problems, if you went to an acupuncturist, there's a high chance that either one bladder acupressure point 1 or bladder acupressure point number 2, they would stick a needle in to, and I say stick a needle in, it's actually just a very thin, super fine wire. It doesn't even go that deep at all or puncture very far, because even just using your finger and pressing up against it like that, you are stimulating the point. You are getting the depth that you need to, and it doesn't take much force. And a lot of people will feel their sinuses open, their eyes start to rest and settle. Actually, very intuitively, a lot of people go for acupressure bladder number 2 when they're having a headache to start helping to alleviate the headache. Sometimes people do the headaches push too hard and they don't actually end up alleviating the headache, but they numb the sensation of the headache by pushing there. But this meridian is mirrored on the back of the body. So as it comes, or actually mirrored on the front too. So right here where you have the bladder 1 point, you'd have the same bladder 1 point on the opposite side of the face. And they would just go, the lines would parallel with each other coming up a little bit over and then over the top of the head where you can see it kind of coming down the back of the neck. As it comes down the back of the neck, it comes down the back of the body. And there's this bladder meridian is one of the longest ones in the body. And travels in 2 sets parallel in between the shoulder blades. So we've got the spine here and the shoulder blade over here. The first line they generally talk about comes down right alongside the spine, and then Voop teleports right back up to here and continues the second pathway. Some meridian charts will actually just show you the meridian creating a fork and traveling down both sides from the spine right here. And each of these bladder points on the back connects into the nervous system of the spine that directly goes and correlates out into your organ systems. So there are certain bladder points in the back where I have actually even had a student of mine. She volunteered as she had a heart murmur and her heartbeat was irregular. And we worked some of the bladder points in her back, and suddenly her heart, she felt it warm up in her chest and her heartbeat stabilize and get stronger. It only took about 5 minutes for the change to occur for her. And by the end of her schooling, when she graduated, she pulled me aside and said, ever since you worked on me, that heart murmur has never come back. And so it can be very, very powerful because you can do this with the digestive organs, the reproductive organs to help with hormone balancing and many other things too. Moving down, we've got from the bladder meridian that ends at the pinky toe, connects into the kidney meridian that starts in the bottom of the foot, travels up the inside of the ankle, travels up close to the front of the body, and then ends just underneath the collarbone where it actually enters deeper into the body where you can't palpate and touch, and it goes into the back of the throat and to the very back of the tongue. So if people lose their voice, you can actually use this meridian at the top next to the collarbone to actually strengthen their voice back up for those who are lecturing or teachers, and they just lose their voice naturally because of that. This isn't quite in order. So it doesn't normally connect from kidney to liver, but we're going to go ahead and jump to the liver, which also starts in the foot, starts on the big toe, not the, like if you put your big toes together, those points don't touch. This is actually on the other side of your big toe, the one that's close to the second toe. And then it travels up the front of the ankle, off to the side of the insides of the leg, and then comes up. It actually runs through the reproductive organs. And this meridian is very beneficial for those who are suffering from reproductive organ problems because of how it runs through the reproductive organs and hormones, and then ends at the ribs here, where it too then goes deeper and actually travels up into the face and mouth and runs through the gums of the teeth and up into the eyes. And I usually end up having to work the liver meridian for people who have terrible, terrible migraines or a lot of digestive problems that can create all sorts of different types of headaches too. So a lot of headaches could be digestive related too, and that's a big ordeal for a lot of people, especially when it comes to this next meridian. As you can see, it travels a lot through the head and down the side of the body, the gallbladder meridian. It starts by the eye, comes down to the ear, and crisscrosses back and forth across the scalp into the forehead. There's another little hollow spot you can easily find. It's directly above your pupil, the center of your eye, just maybe about a finger width above. If you press into this area right here, you'll feel a little hollow spot in the skull there. Most people will feel that. I felt some people actually have felt where it's really hard to find it, but most people will find that little hollow spot very easily. And then that too comes down or comes across the top of the head and then down the side of the neck to the side of the body, over across the ribs, comes around to the front of the hips and then to the glutes where the sciatic nerve kind of comes in, and then travels down the outside of the leg across the IT bands and out towards the fourth toe. And then that's actually where the gallbladder connects in with the liver meridian and jumps over to the big toe at that point. You've got a meridian for your heart. It's a very small meridian in comparison to the gallbladder or the bladder meridian, traveling from the armpit down to the inside of the pinky. Very easy to kind of follow and trace. It then connects into the small intestine meridian, which starts at the end of the pinky where the gallbladder ends, travels up the back of the arm, through the shoulder blade to the cheekbone and sinuses, and then right next to the ear. And so I see a lot of times when people have small intestinal issues, they'll also have some sort of shoulder issue or sinus issue or neck issue. or a lot of like numbness in the fingertips around the nerves that travel down through that area. This one, we call it the heart constrictor or the pericardium. It starts by the chest and next to the nipple, and then comes across the forearm or across the bicep, down through the forearm to the middle finger. Pericardium is responsible for the transportation of our blood, but in Chinese medicine, but in allopathic medicine, they just consider it like a container for the heart, a little protective barrier around the heart. And so a lot of people are hearing more stories about myocarditis, and what a lot of that kind of is an inflammation around the heart. Then we have what we call the triple heater meridian. The triple heater meridian is not connected to any one specific organ, but it's actually connected to all of the organs and the entire endocrine system. So this is a very, very important one when it comes to the health of digestion, especially that in women. Because women's hormones are quite a great deal more complex than men's hormones are. It starts in the ring finger, travels up the back of the arm, comes across the shoulder, up the side of the neck, and around the ear, and then to the temple where the eyebrow ends. And there too is a little hollow spot that you can feel. I had somebody once tell me they remember this meridian because it's the three rings: the ring finger, the ear ring, and then the eyebrow ring or the brow ring. I don't remember if there's a special name for that one particularly. And then the spleen. This meridian actually also connects in with what we call the pancreas meridian. So people who are diabetic or have other digestive issues, this is an important meridian to look for there. It starts in the inside of the big toe. Like if you put your big toes together, this is where that one starts. Where the liver is close to the second toe, this one's on the outside of the big toe. And it travels up the inside of the leg, up through the leg here. You see it's a very similar pathway to the liver, but then it does, instead of cutting across to the floating rib and then to the sides of the ribs, it actually comes straight up and around and then hooks into and underneath the armpit onto the side of the body. And that's a very sensitive area right there for a lot of people, but you definitely feel it in between the ribs as you push on that spot. It can be like a nice little hollow spot where all the tissues just seem to part ways and allow you to sink in. And then the one for the stomach. This is important, of course, for the digestion. Most people have a tendency to think, oh, the stomach, and they're actually talking about their whole abdomen and all the organs inside it. But the stomach itself, of course, helps to break foods down with the stomach acids. You see it actually starts up by the eye, just underneath the eye. Again, if you find the center of your eye where your pupil is and then touch the bone right there below it, you'll feel a little hollow spot just below that. And this meridian travels straight down, comes straight down, and then hooks up alongside the jaw, up into the hairline, and then comes back and then comes down alongside the esophagus. And then from the collarbone, it fans out to about the same level of space as where the nipple comes straight down through. And actually the acupuncture point in the nipple is considered one to be very precious in Chinese medicine, where they absolutely do not want people to stick any sort of needle or piercing in. And then it kind of cuts down a little bit closer to the midline of the body on both sides, and then continues its pathway down the front, down the legs, down the front of the legs, and out to the second and third toe. Most accurately, people look at the acupuncture point being on the second toe, but there is a separate deeper meridian that does connect into the middle toe with it as well.
You mentioned like a hollow spot
Yes.
on a lot of the points. Is there usually a hollow spot wherever any of these points are?
Most of the time you will find a hollow spot or areas where it just happens to fall right in between a lot of tissues, like your muscles or your tendons or even veins. There's a few times where there might be a vein that if an acupuncturist was going to put a needle in that acupuncture spot, they would actually physically move the vein out of the way to make sure that they can get to the acupuncture point without causing any damage to the vein. And so they'll physically just manipulate the tissue slightly to put the needle there. In most cases, yes, you will find like a little hollow spot of tissues where it's all falls into very soft areas. And in martial arts, they teach martial artists to strike these zones because they're very vulnerable. And if you get struck in a certain spot of your whole arm can go limp and dead. It doesn't mean that there's no blood flow to it at all. It doesn't mean that there's no connection to that arm, but it pretty much just goes limp and numb for people whoever been taking a strong hit in the arm. And that's because you've severed the meridian connection. And you can think of the meridian connection in that aspect of like communications. You've totally lost communications with that limb, and now you're unable to use it. It's very similar when our bodies get stressed out and create different physiological functions, where it creates these little dams or these blocks in these meridian pathways, where suddenly your legs are tired. It's hard to climb stairs. You might be trying to walk to a grocery store and you try to step up onto a curb and your foot kicks the curb and it's not even that high up, but you're attempting to lift, but for whatever reason the meridians are not strong enough, and so your brain says, okay, lift your leg, and then your leg's like, but I can't, and it hits the curb, and you start to trip, or climbing the stairs just feels very, very taxing. There are meridians, especially here on the front of the leg. One of my favorites is stomach 36 and stomach 37. Working these two acupressure points on the front of the leg next to the shin bone can oftentimes restore people's strength to their legs, and they can start climbing stairs with relative ease, especially elderly clients who are suffering from the ability to climb their stairs at their house or something, where they're just intimidated by it because they don't feel stable or secure. That's another very important thing, actually, is the stability of these meridians. If they're flowing strong, all the tissues, all the muscles, all the ligaments, the tendons, the bones, they will feel supported and strong. If the meridian is weak, then these areas of the body will start to feel weaker and weaker, and more muscles and more areas, different areas of the body will start stiffening up to try to compensate for that weakness, and things will just not structurally move as well or as freely because there is the stiffness. Did that kind of answer your question, Amy?
Yeah, yeah. I had a separate one about like you know how when your foot falls asleep
Yeah.
is what's happening with the chi and the meridians when that happens.
I mean, could be a couple of things. You mean, obviously, if you take a rubber band and put it around your ankle and it's really tight, it's going to cut off blood flow and circulation. That can cause your foot to go asleep. Um, in a lot of cases, yes, it's going to be the meridian that's going to be at fault for it. But you could there's layers to it, really, because the numbness is going to be oftentimes the nerves or the blood. And if it's the blood, you're pinching something off somewhere in your body, which could result in a lack of blood flow to a specific area like your ankle or your foot. Um, that could be happening because there's a weakness in a meridian where that area it's getting pinched off. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the foot. Maybe you're sitting in your chair and maybe it's like a nerve, like you're sitting in your chair and suddenly you sit in a weird position and you feel this numbness go down your leg or into your foot or something. It could be that you're sitting in a position which pinching a nerve, but if the meridians were full, there's a good chance that you wouldn't be pinching that nerve sitting that way that you are. Or you would immediately instinctually adjust your body mechanics to sit more comfortably and naturally if the meridians were structurally strong and holding all the tissues in the proper places. So yes, there is that meridian aspect to it. But we also need to identify if it is a blood flow issue or if it's like a nerve issue as well.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the lung meridian, it starts in the chest at the pec. and then travels down the outside of the bicep and all the way to the thumb. And this meridian also helps to energize the lungs. Very common acupressure point that I'll use for clients who have allergies and they have tight, stiff necks that are creating headaches. I'll just come up to the lung pressure point here. Press on that, it'll open up their airways a little bit more. They'll breathe better. Their muscle tension on their pecs will relax, and then their shoulders will relax, allowing that tension up their neck to start to decrease and the headache to dissolve. So sometimes there's like layers to each one of these pressure points. Sure, it connects in with the lungs, but it also helps the muscles, helps the neck, the head, the sinuses, and so much more. And any of these points will help the lungs, but they do it in slightly different ways too. So you can use these points for any injury or pain in that area. So if you had a shoulder pain, like right here, I might go ahead and press on the lung pressure points, lung 1 and lung 2, and see if that sends circulation over across through the deltoid or the shoulder where you're having the pain, and see if that pain alleviates. And oftentimes it will, at least to some degree. There's probably other pressure points. And specifically in the large intestine meridian, you see that this point starts in the index finger and travels up the side and back of the arm to the elbow, up over the shoulder. And this is where a lot of shoulder problems come in, is from this particular meridian itself. Oh, give me 1 second. I had somebody else joining. Just noticed that coming in. So maybe they will be a part of this now too. It's okay, they haven't missed the most important stuff yet. So we'll see. Yeah, these points here at the bottom of the feet aren't, and the hands are just where the meridians have these, what they call source points. They're balancing points on the meridians. Then we have 2 that run up the center of the body. One called the conception vessel channel that travels from the groin, the perineum really, and then right up to underneath the tongue. And then we have the governing vessel, which travels from the same spot, but the opposite directions, up the spine over the top of the head, and ends at the gums on the teeth. There's actually an acupuncture point on the gums of the teeth there. And in Chinese medicine, yoga practices, they'll often tell you take your tongue, stick it to the roof of your mouth. And when you do, it makes a connection between these 2 meridians. Your tongue acts like as the conduit between the 2, connects them. And they call that the micro or the micro orbit through the body. Micro orbit, cosmic orbit, I can't remember. The cosmic orbit, I think, is what they call it. Yeah, cosmic orbit through the body. And that these deal a lot with our hormones. If you're into chakra medicine, then these connect right into the chakra glands, or I should say that the chakras, which are the endocrine glands, which then also does connect back into that triple heater meridian that I mentioned and talked about before. Grace, did you manage to join us? Are you here with us now? No response from Grace. We're going to go ahead and continue. This is going to probably be the next most important part coming up. I do have this form where it actually talks about evidence of the meridians, where back in the 1950s and the 1970s, several doctors found different ways to actually physically test the meridian pathways in the body. Just as a quick, like, sort of synopsis on one of them, there was, I can't remember which one, if it was Dr. Robert Becker. Let's see, he identified the lower resistance values of the pathways. Yeah, so he used a direct current to figure out how the meridians were pulsing, and he'd find if somebody had a pain, he would test the area before and after the zone on the meridian where the person would have pain, and if there was less reaction to that, it would make note that there's a meridian blockage, and when they would unblock the meridian and then test the direct current again, there was a noticeable difference in how the current traveled through from those points. And then, oh, I didn't mean to click on that yet, but the other one that's really important in that test study of the evidence is that there is they injected radioactive isotopes into the body where they were able to measure it. Think of it as like a dye. They were able to do imaging. I think it showed up on X-rays where they were able to trace the meridians. They'd inject the dye into the acupuncture point and then take a picture, and they'd see the dye traveling through the pathway of the meridian. Where if they injected it directly into a muscle belly where there is no pathway or meridian, that it would just sit there as kind of like a glob and slowly spread out. Whereas it was more of an immediate effect with the actual meridian acupuncture point. Now, the 5-element theory of Chinese medicine. This is where we get into the health of the organs and the functions of the organs. The very basic concept of the 5 elements is we have these 2 cycles. We have we call the cycle of generation or creation, and the cycle of destruction or contraction. So we got one of growth and one of sort of like a stabilizing force, so to speak, so that things don't get too out of control. The idea is you have this water element in nature and in our bodies. And in nature, you find that water is the fuel and life force for the wood to grow. So then the wood becomes fuel and life force for fire. Fire burns all of the wood and the nutrients and becomes the life force for the earth again. And the earth then turns around and creates metals. And those metals, as those are being created, attract moisture and water. It's one of the reasons why what is it, the great expansion of the United States pushing out towards the west, and you had the gold rush. Everybody was panning for gold in riverbeds because they knew that the water was attracted to the precious metals. And this is how the cycle of creation occurs. And the cycle of destruction or contraction, water is the force that extinguishes or regulates fire. Fire is the force that melts or softens the metal. Metals help chop the trees down, or if there's a lot of metal in the soil, it actually inhibits a lot of plant growth. So if you've ever been to Sedona where there's a lot of red dirt, it's because there's a lot of iron in it. The plants are a lot more spread apart. It's harder for certain plants to grow in those areas where there's too much metals. And then if you've ever had a plant or a weed that you want to pull out of the earth, you realize that if that plant is alive, it hugs and tugs and squeezes that earth and holds on for dear life. But if you kill the plant, it pops right up out of the earth. The wood element is what regulates and holds and stabilizes the earth element together. If you have sand or maybe not sand, but soft soil, and then you plant things in that area, suddenly the plants will start grabbing onto all of the soil with their roots and growing deeper and deeper until they have a strong connection to the earth where they're not going to let go. Meanwhile, the earth is what you use to trap water, guide water to where you want it to go, or absorb water. So if you're having a flood, you buy some sandbags, you throw the sandbags down, the sand absorbs the moisture in the water, and now you don't have to worry about the flooding in the house as much. Or you could just think of, the water is going to be going wherever the earth tells it to. And so this is how nature works. And this is how the cosmic forces in life work, is through these systems. And we have 2 other things that we refer to as the yin functions and the yang functions in the body. And that's why you see these symbols of the yin and the yang. The yin and the yang are the balance. We want balance. We crave balance, but sometimes our bodies are not in balance. And there are yin and yang aspects of the water, wood, fire, earth, and metal energies. And those actually are our organs. And if we work with certain organs, we can actually help the health of each of those elements in creating a sense of balance. We got another person coming in now. Here we go. All right. So moving along here, the 5-element theory. We're going to start with the water element. You'll see that it's colored in black, where the wood is colored in like a light blue or green. Fire is more of a red. Earth is the brown tones, and then metal is white. These colors actually are very stimulatory to our body in different ways, especially our subconscious. The black or like dark navy blue type colors will actually stimulate the water element. Whereas the light sky or greens, some yellows will actually stimulate the wood element. Fire is definitely stimulated by a lot of like the red colors, the bright, vibrant colors. Earth is also stimulated by the brown and yellowish colors. And then white is just white. The metal is just white. Over here, you see the organs in the water section. We've got the element, we've got the organ, we've got the bowel. So over here where it has water, you might notice there's a time zone underneath each of these organ systems. And this is the actual time of day when those organs are most active. So during 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., and this goes more off of your personal time, not your digital time necessarily. So there's always a little bit of leeway since the digital time has not been around as long as sundial time. This is more accurate to like the sundial time. But 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. is when the kidneys are most active. If you suddenly feel a sharp dip in your energy during those times, fatigue, where you're just exhausted, almost want to take a nap, or maybe you do take a nap, this would be because your kidneys are possibly having some exhaustion or fatigue, or maybe there's an underlying kidney issue that has yet to be discovered or fully developed. Maybe it's something that's in the works of being developed, and now you're having problems between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. I've met a few people who've had kidney stones, and this is the worst time of day for them, is between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. Where then the bladder also connects in with the lymphatic system is between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. So it's the 2 hours prior to the kidney time. The kidneys and bladder strongly affect the health of the bones. They even affect the health of the blood formation inside the bones. If you know much about allopathic medicine, the kidneys actually help to create a hormone that creates the blood inside the bones. They are the exact, or roughly about the exact same shape as your ears. And on a cellular structure, they are almost completely identical as well. And a lot of times when people are having hearing loss issues, they're also having some sort of kidney issue. They might have a ringing in the ear, deep itch in the ear canal. That could be a small sign or symptom of either a bladder or kidney imbalance prior to. If people deal with a lot of fears or procrastination issues, that's going to represent and manifest into their water element with their kidneys. The mental part, the willpower, so that it helps your willpower. If you're strong-willed, you'll be able to really focus and get things done. Of course, the opposite, you would be procrastinating. Foods that stimulate it are salty foods. You can hear it in people when they sit down and they groan and they go, ugh. That's oftentimes that groaning, that people have some sort of fatigue in either the kidneys or urinary bladder. A lot of times they'll fall out of balance during wintertime, more so than any other. Whereas the wood element, and remember, water is the nourishing force for the wood. And so sometimes if somebody has an imbalance with their liver, maybe we look at the health of the kidneys and make sure that there's nothing stressing the kidneys out, because if there's something stressing the kidneys out, we could help the kidneys, and then it might automatically help the liver or the gallbladder. And you'll see liver between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night, busy mind, racing thoughts, well, that's going to affect your nervous system, and that's going to affect your brain. And so that's going to be most likely the reason why you're waking up between 1 and 3 in the morning. Or with gallbladder, it's difficulty sleeping between 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. And this manifests in the eyes and so a lot of times when people have migraine type headaches, there's a lot of liver acupressure points and things to do to help soothe the eyes and eliminate the pain in the eyes. People with liver imbalances often suffer from ego, anxiety, irritability, being very judgmental. Um, the ego and mental activity can oftentimes be outrageous. You can see this in a lot of alcoholics. You can see all these traits in alcoholics. Um, that element, those organs are stimulated by sour foods, and those people have a tendency to shout a lot.
When you say it's stimulated by sour foods,
Mhm.
does it mean that you improve it or it makes it worse?
Depends on the situation. So if you are having like a deficiency and you eat something sour, it can stimulate the liver and wake it up and give it more strength and encourage it. It brings more nutrients to the liver and the gallbladder, really. Um, but if you have like an overactive or inflamed liver, that could actually sometimes irritate it a little bit. And it's the same with salty foods. Sometimes people will crave salty foods because their kidneys or their bladder are exhausted. So they start eating chips and they can't stop eating chips. And the salt stimulates the kidneys to wake the kidneys up, to keep the kidneys going. So it pokes the bear, so to speak, tells them, hey, wake up, keep going, keep wake up, wake up, wake up. And then eventually the kidneys wake up and they do their job, and then you crash even harder because or you develop even more problems. Like you eat salty foods, suddenly your kidneys in your urinary bladder and lymphatic system stop uh, absorbing the water and pulling the water out of your system, and now you have swelling in your feet or your hands or things like that. um, and then it kind of just goes on from there. And where the heart, the endocrine or sexual glands, we've got the small intestine and the fire, the blood vessels. This connects in with the health of the tongue. Uh, when hormones are fluctuating a lot in men or women, people tend to have a tendency to get really moody, cranky, irritable. Not like irritable where they're angry or frustrated all the time, like the wood element, but just kind of moody, where all of a sudden they explode, erupt, and then they relax back down. Um, and it could come out of nowhere seemingly. Whereas the wood element, the type of irritability that is it's somebody getting on somebody's nerves. It's somebody's pissing them off, and sometimes with liver imbalances, it doesn't take much to piss somebody off. Um, this is actually a huge problem in this day and age in our lives right now, is too much injury to the liver and gallbladder, and it's making people only care about themselves more so than others. And so they become very judgmental, harsh, and very reactive. Where the fire is all about passion, love, creativity, excitement, the intuition, sense of peace. It's stimulated by bitter foods. If you took a piece of bread and stuffed it in your toaster and made it like charcoal black, you'd be able to taste how the heat has turned the toast to a very bitter flavor. Or if you char your food on a grill, you'll get that a little bit more of a bitter flavor to it. And it is stimulated by laughter. The earth is where the spleen and the pancreas, even though the pancreas is part of the endocrine system, this is also where we host the pancreas. Pan, as we know, as a pandemic, means all things. Creas means flesh. And so the pancreas is literally the organ that deals with the flesh, deals with the muscles. And so anytime you exercise a muscle, you are going to turn around and exercise the pancreas in some way or fashion. Stomach organ is also connected in, and you can see that's most active between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. That's when you're supposed to break the fast with breakfast. It is connected in with the mouth. Feelings of worrying or pondering are where I always call it the what if questions, or like when you sit there and you mentally go over things in your head and you're just going in circles. What if this happens? Oh God, what if that happens? Oh, what if this happens? But instead, what if that doesn't happen? But what if this happens instead? You're just worrying and you're going in circles. And that's how the earth spins. It spins in circles. So it's that constant flowing of circular movement in the mind. You end up right where you began. it is overly stimulated, and not overly, but it is stimulated by the sweet foods. Um, and you can hear that in people's voices sometimes as a song kind of effect, where they might kind of talk through tones a little bit, but they also might talk in a way that is very firm and slow. So you might hear somebody talk where they're kind of like this, and they just talk slow. It's not about pace or speed. You just talk with a sense of heavy firmness in their voice. And that's kind of that earth element aspect to it. Um, Metal, you'll have the lungs most active between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. If you start suffering from allergies or asthma, you might be waking up during those hours. That would be most likely why. A lot of people who have asthma also have skin conditions like eczema. And so if the lungs are weakened in some way or fashion, the skin might start showing issues of eczema or dry patches. It's not the only reason why people have eczema or dry patches, but it's a very, very common reason. Large intestine. It's funny, these two organs are not directly connected in the body, but studies have shown that people who are cigarette smokers are also 7 times more likely to develop large intestine cancers as well as lung cancers. Why the medical community has noticed this, I don't know why they noticed it, but it's true that these two organs are very connected. In fact, all the organs in this left column here, the kidneys, liver, heart, spleen, pancreas, lungs, these are all what we call the yin organs, or the feminine organs of the element, whereas the yang organs are the masculine. That's going to be the bladder, gallbladder, intestines, stomach, and large intestines as well. And if you eat a lot of spicy foods, you'll definitely notice the stimulation to your skin as you start to sweat, maybe some congestion in the lungs that gets kicked up, or you might start noticing it if you've had way too much spicy foods in your large intestine. And you can hear this in the sounds of people's voices when they sound sad or they're sounding weepy. And this is where that grief and sadness comes in. They also have that trait of compassion or sensitivity. So people who are very strong with their metal element can be very compassionate towards others and very sensitive towards other people's feelings. Not necessarily empathic, but they are at least capable of understanding somebody else's feelings and being conscientious as to how not to make their feelings worse in situations. So interesting Greek story. This is a relationship between the liver and the lungs. But the ancient Greeks told a story about a man named Prometheus who brought fire to humans from the gods. And Zeus had him punished for his ego to go against the will of the gods. And he was strapped to a giant boulder where a great eagle came down and ate his liver every day. He would wake up and his liver will have regenerated, and the eagle will come back and eat his liver again. Sounds like a very gruesome, horrifying story, but many cultures view creatures like the eagle is a creature with powerful lungs, something strong enough to take flight and stay in flight for long periods of time. And so as the lore of it actually goes, is that it's a story of how the metal element is what regulates the wood element, how the lungs regulate the liver. And then it also tells the story of how the liver is a regenerative organ. It will literally grow more tissue back. If you've damaged it, it is an organ that will continue to grow. And that's what plants do. If you trim back the tree of or branch of a tree, it'll just grow a new branch. It won't necessarily heal that branch that was cut off. It will just grow a whole new section of branch. And if you also look at the nervous system and imagine the roots of the tree or the branches of a tree look like the nervous system, that too also explains why the behavior of these things mirrors nature and the human body. The human body is part of nature. So what do we do? I'm sure a lot of you guys are asking, how do we balance these systems? Well, the meridians are definitely a good way to start with them and to go through with them. However, there is something called meridian brushing, which is a fantastic, simple, easy technique. If this is something you guys want, I can email you the PDF of this. And meridian brushing, I'm going to scroll to the bottom real quick. Helps with low energy problems, cold limbs, coldness, depression, bad circulation, leg pain, and overall health. What it does is it energizes all the meridians, bringing energy and healing to all the internal organs at once. So as you do this, there's there's about 6 meridians in the arms. So if you stand or sit relaxed, place your palm on your shoulder on the inside of the hand facing up. So this hand facing up, the other hand comes up to your shoulder. You just want to rub gently down, a little bit of pressure, not too much pressure, down to the fingertips alongside the arm. Rotate that hand, or rotate that arm back over, and then brush up the outside of that arm. So turn the hand over parallel to the ground and rub the outside of the arm to the shoulder. And do this with both arms. And as you do this with both arms, you're going to hit 6 of the 12 main meridian systems that connect to your organs. And then with the legs, there is, you can stand, or you can even do this kind of sitting too. But if you do this sitting, you can't have too many things blocking the areas where you need to reach your legs. You want your feet apart. You want to reach down, palms on the inside of the ankles. You don't actually have to start on the inside of the ankles, but this is where we're going to start with this. Reach down with the palms on the inside of the ankles. Draw your hands up the inside of the legs slowly until reaching to the genital area. And then you're going to place your palms on the outside of your upper thighs and rub slowly down on the back and outside of the leg down to the ankle. The thumb will be on the outside of the leg, and the other fingers will be on the back of the leg. And what this will do is your thumb will kind of come across your the front of your shin, but the outside portion of your shin, and that will help to stroke down the meridian pathway for the stomach, while you're also hitting some of the other meridians. And then you hit all 12 of the main meridians, not the entire length of the meridians, but all 12 of the main meridians. And if you keep this up, going back and forth through the arms and through the legs for 5 to 10 minutes at a time, not each limb, but I mean, you could do it each limb that way, but you will start to notice a very big difference in your energy. Any feelings of depression might start to lighten up and alleviate. You'll feel a lot of warmth in your body as the circulation improves. And your organs will actually start functioning and digesting things down a whole lot faster. And keep this up for long periods of time. Some people will actually stimulate detoxifying effects, which I will give people the warning right now. If you do stimulate this detoxification effect, you don't want to stop the meridian brushing. You might start to develop a headache, maybe feel slightly nauseous. These are all normal things. And what's happening is your body is starting to eliminate something. If you stop the flow, your body will not end up being able to eliminate it all at once. And the headache or the nausea will probably linger. But if you keep going for a few more minutes, it always alleviates. You just keep going, and the pain, the pressure, the nausea, whatever the symptom is, just about always alleviates almost every single time. Actually, I've never had anybody come back to me and say, oh, I kept doing the meridian brushing, but the nausea didn't go away, or the headache didn't go away. But I've had plenty of people say, oh yeah, I started to get a headache doing it, so I stopped. And I said, why'd you stop? What is the thing I told you to not do is to stop, right? They're like, yeah. And they're like, it lingered so long too. And I was like, if you had it just kept going, it would have immediately subsided, and you wouldn't have had to have suffered for the next couple of hours with a headache. It would have just gone away within just minutes.
Can you do that whenever you have a headache, or is it only when you get a headache when you're doing the brushing?
Hold on, there's somebody else joining right now too. I just caught them on the, oops. You can do this while you're having a headache, and it can help, but there's a good chance that if you're doing this technique while you're having the headache, you it's going to take a little longer than just a few minutes to alleviate the headache. because your body is having already some sort of other imbalance going on with it. But if you keep doing this long enough, you will help to alleviate the headache. One of the things I tell people, even if you just sat there and did one arm over and over and over again, all these meridian pathways are connected. And what ends up happening is, like, if you imagine yourself running a bathtub of um, hot water, and suddenly you reach in and you go, ooh, that's a little too hot. You decide you turn on the cold water to try to mix the cold water in. You don't have to take your hand and go in a full circle around the bathtub to mix the cold water in. You can just brush and sweep on one corner or one side, creating a flow. And eventually the whole system will start to circulate and find a balance or homeostasis with it. So you could just end up using just the arms or just the legs. And there is a way to incorporate the meridian brushing techniques through the scalp and head, down the back of the neck and body. Matter of fact, very easily, what I'll do is I'll go through the arms, and then from there, I'll imagine as I'm taking a bowl of or a cup of water in my hand, pouring it over the top of my head, down the back of my neck, reaching behind me and to my back with my thumbs to the side. And then I'll just brush down my back, down my glutes, down the sides of my legs. And then I will go out to the toes and then up the inside of the legs. And I'll be right back up to ready to do the arms again. And so that's one method of actually doing the meridian brushing, where you keep the flow going all the way up through the arms, through the head, down the legs, back up the legs, and then up to the arms again. And you almost don't even have to take your hands away from your body to do it. And you can alleviate tons and tons of pains or problems just by doing these techniques. It is such a massive self-therapy for people and their digestive organs. You can eliminate so many problems just within your digestion alone with this. It's not just digestive health, of course. This also helps with your hormones and your blood circulation, your nervous system, and so much more. Most people, as they do this, within just a couple of strokes through the arms or through the body, they start to feel tingling. They start to feel their body warming up. They feel a sense of relaxation. Keep it up for 5 minutes and you'll feel a significant difference. Keep it up, like I said, for 15 minutes. Around the 15-minute marker, a lot of times is where that warning. I tell people, if you go for 15 minutes, you might start stimulating that detoxification kind of effect. And at that point, if you don't stop, even if it's been 15 minutes and you've developed a headache from this, just keep going, because now your body's detoxing and shifting some things. If you can imagine, for example, your intestines are like these little tubes, and sometimes food particles get stuck in the little grooves as they squeeze around. And it gets impacted into the sides of the intestines, and it just sits there rotting inside your stomach, or not inside your stomach, but rotting inside your small intestines or large intestines for long periods of time. Fiber is definitely something that helps with that kind of stuff, but sometimes if there's an injury or issue in the area, it doesn't really help as much anyway. But if this food has been stuck there for a long time and bacteria has been nothing but eating it away, now all of a sudden you starting to stimulate the organ health to get that to loosen up and push through. It's probably not going to feel very good in that moment. You might feel a little nauseous or something, but if you can get your body into the strength it needs to completely push that part of that bowel movement through those intestines in that area and clean out those intestines from the inside just by doing this simple meridian brushing, then yeah, after a few minutes of weird icky feeling, you'll suddenly feel great, even better than before. And it's so so much fun to see people's reactions sometimes when they see something so simple and they go, well, it sounds so simple, how can that possibly help? And then they try it and they're like, oh my god, I feel so good, how come it's so simple? And it's like, oh, it's because it's so simple that it works so well. And because you're working all the meridians simultaneously. Oh, hold on. you end up helping to heal each one of the elements in the body. And as you continue to heal these elements in the body, what ends up happening is, let's say you have high blood pressure, and the high blood pressure is because the high blood pressure is part of the fire element in the heart, right? But if the kidneys are not regulating the fire element, like you see here, where the kidneys and the water element regulate the blood and the fire element, well, this is too low, this is too high, because it's not being regulated well enough. You strengthen those kidneys, maybe through the meridian brushing or acupressure work, or maybe herbs or something. And now suddenly the kidneys start functioning better, and the blood pressure drops. Or could be any sort of combination of things. You can almost look at this as like a game of rock, paper, scissors, but quite a bit more intricate than that. And it can all be linked together, helping one another out. But this is how the whole body's organ systems kind of function and work in harmony in the most simplistic way you can possibly view it. And it makes so much sense. The more I've learned over the years about allopathic medicine, or like the Western medical viewpoint, all the sciencey stuff, I sit there and I look and I see all the exact connections. The hormone that I said that the kidneys create that helps the formation of blood in the bones makes perfect sense. The fact that the kidneys help to regulate minerals and calcium and whatnot makes sense why they'd be connected with the bones. So there's just a whole slew of different things that I've kept learning over time that make perfect sense in connecting with these 5-element theory of Chinese medicine on the most simplistic way. It's so natural and easy sometimes to help people with digestive problems. And I hear all these times, I got clients of mine that come in and they're like, how come I've never learned any of this kind of stuff? And I was like, well, because you're doctors and naturopaths and whatnot, they don't know this kind of stuff. They're very limited in what they have skills and talents with, and it comes a lot to their technology. If their technology isn't perfect, if their technology isn't Star Trek technology or Star Wars technology, then clearly they're not as advanced as they'd like to be with being able to find things, diagnose things, do the scans and readings in an easy way. Your heart doctor is not going to talk to your endocrinologist. And if you have a endocrine problem that's creating a heart problem, they're probably not going to notice it unless you go and find out from your endocrinologist that they say, oh yeah, you have this hormone that's way out of balance. Oh, that's why it's affecting your heart. Or most people don't even know about like how the relationship of the liver and the pancreas works, but oftentimes liver damage is one of the causes of diabetes in our society. And it's because the liver and the wood element helps to regulate the earth. It overregulates and it shrinks and hurts the earth element, and it shrinks and hurts the pancreas. And suddenly the pancreas isn't producing the insulin that the liver is supposed to help it produce. The liver actually will help the pancreas to produce insulins. And if there's some sort of damage with the liver where that's not functioning properly, then yeah, your pancreas doesn't produce insulin. Suddenly you become diabetic. And people blame it on the pancreas, but in that case, it's the liver is the problem. So there's so many different interactions going on within the body all at once. And doing the meridian brushing is probably going to be your simplest and easiest way to, somebody had to jump off. Simplest and easiest way to start balancing these systems out on your own. And so each and every single person that sees this video in the future, I hope that they recognize the value of what this chart has to offer and what the value of the meridian brushing can do for them. And I hope that you guys pay attention to this as well and really start practicing on yourselves the meridian brushing and see what physiological differences you start to have. Practice it every day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. If you're dealing with a lot of issues, you want to practice it for longer. You can do it before you go to bed. You can do it when you wake up. If you do it before you go to bed, it should help you sleep better at night. If you do it when you wake up in the morning, you wake up feeling more energized for your day. You might actually even have an appetite. If you're the type of person who doesn't normally have an appetite in the morning, this can help to stimulate that appetite. So there's just so much that this chart and this work can actually do to help. Most acupuncturists are trained in Chinese 5-element system, but they use a slightly different version of things. Just depends on which school you go to, the school of thought, at least. This is the simplest and most true form of the Chinese medicine that I have found. And it's just powerful. It's really, really powerful. And so many people can get so much more help than they actually are getting. But that's it for today. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen. I hope you guys got some really valuable information. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.